Hey everybody, I am here at COSM in upstate New York, Alex and Allison Gray's kind of psychedelic art mecca. If you're watching this on video, you can see a bunch of cool art behind me and a whole bunch of different rooms and a couple different buildings and artists featured, and I'm planning on releasing my comedy specials, maybe doing a live streaming from here the day that it releases, whenever we figure out when that's going to be. And I just thought I'd make the intro here since I'm in a fun, interesting place. Speaking of live, fun, interesting things, my guest today, we've collaborated on a few different live comedy science events, and have been meaning to do it a little bit more. I used to do a show, Stand Up Science, where I'd have various comics on, and my guest today has her own science communication podcast. She's actually a scientist, though, but and has a whole zombified media, and I love collaborating with scientists that have a passion for public science communication, trying to figure out ways to make it a really fun live experience. It's always a challenge of marketing and how to get people out and all of those things that go into it, how to make it accessible enough without being lame, and make it fun for everyone, and so to that end, we have a couple things coming up. One on the 17th this month in the Bay Area, in Berkeley, in the Bay Area. I forget exactly where, the Exploratorium, their science museum. There's like a Thursday night kind of adult only evening thing where we're doing a kind of a science of the apocalypse show. And then on the 26th, we're doing something in Joshua Tree. I don't know a whole bunch about it. That's more of like an experimental, putting some stuff together for the future, but all this stuff will be at shanemauss.com. And then in the fall, she has a zombie apocalypse medicine meeting that I've taken part in before. It's a really fun way of communicating science ideas through kind of pop culture interest in like prepping and zombies and that sort of thing. What's the actual kind of science nitty gritty of some of those concepts that we get a kick out of watching about on movies and TVs and such. And so if you're a Here We Are listener, she'd been on the show many times in the past, but that in October, it's in Arkansas. I should look up these details before I start blabbing. But it's at the end of October. We're maybe trying to line up a few other things as well. Another past guest, Colton Scrivener. You may have heard me talk about his work in the past, depending on how long you've been following me. Had this morbid curiosity scale on my old show, Mind Under Matter. We took that while recording some episodes. Had a lot of fun with it. Studies kind of the science of horror and why different people have different preferences and tastes in different like horror genres, right? And so really interesting, cool work. Again, something that is a way of making science kind of interesting and accessible for adults, which is just a huge dream of mine. So I'm doing a bunch of this kind of stuff. I'm trying to collaborate with as many scientists as I can, in fact, to put together some live events. Italia and I, who I had on episode 4 or something like that, has his night science show. I want to do some stuff with him. So continuing to work towards starting to turn some of the science plus comedy communication stuff into live events, because it's a nice blend. Either I'm doing comedy as a stand-up, or I'm doing science with more science communication with this show. And a nice way to merge the two is with live science and comedy events, where I kind of get to plan out things a little bit ahead of time and write material and all of that. And also combine it with some genuine conversations and getting to open things up to a live audience. So just something I've been super interested in for years. And so go to shanemauss.com and join my email list so you can be notified whenever I have things like that going on. And enjoy today's episode about the end of the world before the end of the world. You guys are awesome. Thanks for listening/watching. So joining me today, I have my friend Athena Aktipis. This is a field guide to the apocalypse, a mostly serious guide to surviving our wild times. This was written even before Wild Times. It's almost as if Wild Times have kind of always been and may even be getting exponentially wilder.
Yes.
You were mentioning AI. This is so how my I will. This show is so tangential and like I don't have a plan. And I'm like, even that, I was like, oh, I'll give like a 2-minute little rap about a thing. And then I'm like, no, now I want to talk about modernity and other weird things. Because we're talking about AI beforehand on the walk here.
Yeah.
Okay, what I was going to mention, oh man, this is ADHD, everybody. Is it still with no, do they do the H or the...
Well, whether or not it is a disorder is now kind of up in the air because it's kind of like most of us have it. So,
yeah.
And is it dysfunctional or is it actually functional?
A part of the human condition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. But I was, especially now that we're trying to. That might be a benefit of AI, is that now the sorts of things that, say, Adderall could help a human to do. AI's got that covered.
You don't even need the drugs anymore. You just go into AI and you're like, I have this idea. Here are 7 keywords, and then it has like a business plan for you. So
yeah. And whereas like Adderall is stopping some of the creative processes that like AI can't yet do in a fully satisfying way, I would say. I mean, I think that, as someone who's used it for just a little, like I used it productively to do like an impression of Hunter S. Thompson, because I'm not an impressionist, and it like created like a really funny impression.
Huh.
But when I've tried to use it for like because it knows I'm a comedian, I'll ask it serious questions about like science, and then it will pitch jokes at me. It'll be like, how about this? How about this for your act? And it's the sort of stuff where like, if you are a little uncomfortable at your job in the office and you would maybe like to be able to be a little funnier and get a little joke
in a very corporate setting.
In a corporate setting, like I think that it, like really could, and everyone should. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
If you can like get a couple more laughs around the office or something. If you're trying to write like a professional like stand-up comedy act, not as helpful. But anyhow.
Well, I once tried to get ChatGPT to roast me, and I was like, here's a bunch of stuff about me could be like good for roasting me. And I kept feeding it stuff, and it always like kept coming up with the lamest things, or it would be like actually trying to like,
boost your spirit.
Boost me.
That's the thing.
No, That's not the point.
It was certainly trained with particular sensitivities and our egos in mind.
It's designed to please us.
Even if it's not trained, even if it was like broadly like, get out there and do whatever it seems like people want you to do. That's what people are at least training it to do. Like, be nice to me and tell me how good my ideas are.
It was actually really fun and funny because I kept being like, well, you see, there's like these levels where if you roast me, you're showing that you understand me, you understand my weaknesses. And so it's actually a positive thing to, you know, say, I understand your weaknesses, but I'm not going to take advantage of them. So I like laid out all the sort of meta theory about
how just like general life stuff that's like obvious to any human. Yeah.
But it still couldn't do it.
That's really funny. I mean, I guess that's kind of that's kind of the idea that I was thinking of is what's going to happen as we it's weird that we can design things in our desires. Like we all have these various like more nuanced emotions and desires, and humans have been able to cooperate and stuff enough to like build buildings and all these various things that are kind of like in our it's biased from our minds. Like there might be a lot of ways to make a spaceship. It's probably very hard to get a like really efficient spaceship, but I bet there's got to be like a female engineer out there that's like, it doesn't need to be phallic shaped, actually. It can be like a wing or something. And
do you know the whole story about like them trying to make effective spacesuits? And they had all these male engineers and they were trying to make all these hard shell suits and they were just failing all the time. And then they brought in some women who were working in textiles and pantyhose and all that. And they're like, actually, you need these flexible suits that, you know, may not look like armor on the inside.
Of course they made them look like armor. Of course. And what, I mean, it would be more amusing if we were all cooperating a little bit more and pointing out some of our like little biases. But it's really troubling when like a perspective is not sharing in the perspective and the conversation and it's creating blind spots.
Yeah, and it's like, well, the vacuum of space is a little bit different from bows and arrows, like, you know, but it's like, we gotta be like formidable out there in space.
This is kind of what I'm, so if we're, you know, just like we, you know, make gods in our image and myths in our image and everything, just like when people are, when I like dismiss UFO sightings and stuff, people are like, oh, you don't believe there's aliens out there in the universe? I'm like, oh, no, I don't believe in your little like green men idea of that you like saw in a bad B movie. Like, I like watching like a documentary on Netflix called Alien Worlds.
Let me show you. We've got a lovely little image in here. Hey, what do you think of this as like the potential aliens that we might encounter? There's the sort of wide-eyed humanoid, which is really not very effective. It's not thermodynamically designed for space travel.
It's like we know that we have all these back problems from being bipedal and all of these other things, but it's just like, you know what would make us just we're near perfect. What would be better?
Bigger head and really big eyes.
Bigger head, bigger eyes.
How about
and then
slightly longer arms?
Like
and really weird hands that are just like bigger for no apparent reason.
And then we'll have like telepathy or all these things.
Absolutely,
that
comes
need,
automatically
like,
with the big head.
So, okay. So then tardigrade and then, exactly. So there's like all of these aliens on I'm like, but the thing is that now we have so much technology that we can build things how we assume they ought to be,
Okay.
and then objective reality is a very stubborn force.
You mean like in the context of AI here, or just in general?
Or just in the idea of like, as we're building AI and building all, the future and self-driving cars and all of these like, miraculous things, we're making them so much in our image that can actually like conflict with what objective. We are building things the way we want the world to be, not necessarily with working within the way the world is.
Yeah.
And I feel like we might bump up against, some very harsh realities. And, obviously, I think global warming is nuclear proliferation. These sorts of things are like very clear examples of. I mean, there's people that have different opinions on global warming, but I think we all kind of get the idea of a nuclear apocalypse.
Yeah. Well, and even, if you're not a big fan of, global warming, climate change, all of that, it's hard to deny that we are having more weather-related disasters and more uncertainty regarding that, even like wildfires, like things are just getting more apocalyptic. And I feel like we can agree on that even outside of the politics of some of these issues, right? That, things are getting weird. That's the reality. And we need more tools for dealing with that. And I think some of those tools we do have, they're sort of built into the way that we interact with our environments, the way we interact with each other, even things as basic as our like sense of adventure and desire to explore, I think can be really important in helping us to deal with all the challenges that we're facing.
So this is on my old show, Here We Are. We had originally, before I got a wonderfully big opportunity to do a whole big tour and Vegas residency and all these things, you were in the midst of writing this book, and I was doing this kind of casual course sort of thing where we were doing multiple episodes of each part, and so you can pick or choose whether you want to go back or listen to those, but just to kind of sum up some things that are relevant to what we're talking about. Speaking of kind of intuition, when people think about an apocalypse, if you watch a show, I just got done watching Mad Max Furioso or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, here's what you're going to need for an apocalypse.
I love the outfits. I want all those outfits, I have to say. They're the best. So.
Oh, of course. It's exactly. I mean, and we all kind of get that it's like art. But it's still, it's coming from a place of what we're gonna need is a flamethrower and like a real tough car that can get around in the desert and stuff.
But the perfect color blue linen outfit. That's what I want. I want. So.
And so your book is so much about how it's actually questioning in a very this is delivering very good news in that within a reality of there are always going to be trying times and tragedies and disasters and always of varying levels of magnitude. What some surprising counterintuitive insights is that humans in many cases do tend to to cooperate much more readily than one would intuitively predict, and certainly than what some shows would show.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the sort of intuitions that people have are often a result of either, watching apocalyptic shows that really emphasize the drama of what happens if things break down. which that makes for much more interesting entertainment. And we're very curious, like, well, what should you do if everybody starts acting horrible or people start being untrustworthy? Because that's a problem that can arise.
Yeah.
But that isn't necessarily what we should expect as the default. Because if we look across human societies, we see that especially during situations that are unpredictable, uncontrollable risks, disasters, things like that, people just jump in and help each other without expecting anything. And, just because there are a few people who might try to take advantage of that kind of situation, that doesn't mean that we should go in with the assumption that when things start getting bad, the fabric of society will fall apart, because that can actually be a self-fulfilling prophecy then, because then you can't trust anybody, and game theory shows our expectations about what is going to happen in a certain situation can dramatically impact the outcome, because if we feel like we can't trust the other person, then we're not going to choose an option that can allow for greater mutual benefit because we're worried about being vulnerable. So it's a challenge, but the sort of fear about, well, what will happen when things are bad. A lot of that is, not really based on what the reality is of how humans behave when things are bad, at least not what most humans do when things get bad.
And there's, how do I want to say this? There's always like cheaters, kind of freeloaders, people. There's some types of like parasitic behavior. There's incentives to. I certainly I cut some corners here and there. I'm illegally parked in a place I'm not supposed to be in right now to do this. We all have a few things like that going, and that's never going to stop. That we always need to be vigilant for opportunistic things, and what amount of it is worth. Is it worth hiring more people to be more attentive to the parking lots to make sure everyone has a parking spot, or but I don't there's no reason to believe that there would be certainly any less cooperation.
Yeah, so there's sort of this inverted U-shaped pattern with like scarcity and resources and cooperation, where if there's a lot, oftentimes people are less cooperative actually, because they become more focused on status competition. And status competition is inherently zero sum, right? It's like either I have more status than you or you have more status than me, if we're in that frame of status competition. Once things start getting bad in terms of resource availability, especially if there's, things that happen unpredictably, they're uncontrollable, like natural disasters and things like that, people start becoming more focused on just basic survival and needs, and oftentimes they have an appreciation of sort of shared vulnerabilities when things like that happen. So they start to be more generous and more cooperative because they're sort of out of that mindset of as much competition. But if things get really bad, and I mean like really, really bad, like people are starving at that level, then you can see a breakdown of cooperation, like with the Ik in Uganda, when they were displaced from their hunting grounds by their government and had this famine, there was this breakdown of cooperation that Colin Turnbull, anthropologist, he went there and he saw that, and he wrote this ethnography basically saying that they're the worst people in the world and their whole culture should be disbanded, and they're horrible human beings. But that was a response to famine, which is a very unusual state for humans to be in. And in fact, once they recovered from the famine, all of their norms of cooperation and sharing came back.
Dust yourself off like, hey, so that was weird. We need one of those moments so bad right now. Okay.
Totally.
The past is the past, isn't it? There is only forward.
Yeah.
Okay, let's all sit down and hash this out.
Yeah.
I mean, the status thing is I forget how loud my voice is. I'm probably they're probably hearing me down the hall. There's I don't know if I have a naive perspective from reading of hunter-gatherer societies and ideas about cooperation, but it seems like modernity has allowed for certain levels of things in the dark triad of like psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, where you could kind of get away with it seems like if you got to be around the same 50 people your entire life, you're probably not going, like the idea of the caveman beating the lady over the head and dragging her back and having her way. That makes for an awkward social situation for the rest of your life, whereas like in a modern society where people can go in and fleece, a whole like small town, or you can rob a bank and
literally
go to the next,
hit and run. You can hit and run today, and you couldn't do that before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that?
Well, so human cooperation and prosociality is quite context dependent, and like we talked about before, also dependent on what your expectations are, right? So if you put the most cooperative person in a situation and tell them, hey, you're going into this environment, and the only way for everybody to do really well is if you all trust each other, but nobody else is going to be trustworthy, then the most cooperative person is going to say, well, then I'm just going to take a small payoff. I'm not going to risk cooperating if I am sort of guaranteed to lose everything because nobody else is going to be trustworthy. So our expectations about what others are going to do very dramatically affect what the optimal choice is for us. And so that means that, so in my mind, a lot of this is kind of about, how do you create situations where individuals can initially have trust or enough trust to begin? How do you then sort of build on that trust and ratchet up? And how do you allow people to have the ability to leave if they need to? So, I'm sure you know about commitment theory and cooperation, right? This idea that like you start with small acts of cooperation and then you build trust and you... I
mean, maybe it's just been a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I think I have a whole list in here. Do I?
I would have.
About cooperation, about commitment theory, and some steps that you can follow to make sure that you don't get exploited. Yeah, here we are, page 99. Okay. It's four things. This is the TLDR. Start with small acts of cooperation.
Okay.
2. Ratchet up to higher levels as cooperation proves successful. 3, don't just focus on cooperation. Also consider if you're effective at coordinating together. Because if you can just cooperate, that doesn't necessarily let you reach the most benefit from division of labor and things like that. Number 4, have an exit strategy if things don't go as planned.
Yeah.
And, then if you have some autonomy and you're sort of allowed to enter and leave interactions based on those kinds of principles, that actually can lead on the sort of aggregate level to conditions that allow cooperation to evolve more effectively. I don't want to get too technical, but there's this whole thing about like population structure. And if you have different groups that are essentially, you know, populations in and of themselves. And then individuals are able to like leave. So say you have I guess the best way to explain it would be in the context of like, say you have 10 groups, maybe they're in the workplace or whatever, 10 groups of 10 people each. So you've got 100 people, but they're in 10 groups of 10.
Okay.
And these groups vary in how cooperative the individuals are in them. You've got like 1 or 2 groups that are really cooperative, a bunch in the middle, and then some groups that really suck. You don't want to be in those groups. If every person in those groups is going to leave if their group isn't sufficiently cooperative, then what ends up happening is the groups that are more cooperative end up being more stable. The groups that are less cooperative are more unstable. And that leads in this sort of very decentralized way to individuals who are less cooperative being on their own, wandering around, not even in groups more. And it allows for cooperators to what's called positively assort with each other. So they have cooperators have preferential interactions with other cooperators because defectors and exploiters are essentially destroying their groups as they're in them. And so, yeah, you might get a defector coming into a group, you know, their group falls apart, they get into another group, they start to maybe poison that group, and over time that group degrades, but it'll then break up. And you can get, you know, new smaller groups forming. And if you have this dynamic process, then it's a completely decentralized way to get cooperation as the outcome that has the higher payoff and that can actually evolve. So it's kind of nerdy, but you know, it's like a bunch of my dissertation was like modeling that exact phenomenon.
Yeah.
So
That's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, that's I feel like there is, it's, you know, 2025. I feel like there's a lot of people that feel just left out of any group whatsoever right now. I think is a thing, and that's you know, there's COVID, there's isolation, there's all those other things, but it's also just, I mean, the like the intensity of the political rhetoric and everything these days has people, I don't know, maybe it's always been that way, but it has people a little more isolated than usual.
I think that's right.
Seems like.
Yeah.
I mean, I usually self-isolate quite a bit, but I don't know. So if what if people what if an individual sees a cooperative group and wants to be like a part of that group? Is there any, if you're out there in that Mad Max situation, is there, I mean, theoretically a cooperative group is like, I don't know, going to let outsiders in and assimilate, perhaps? I don't know.
Yeah, I think, you know, it depends on the context, the expectations, and you know, it's risky if you're a cooperative group that really, you know, already knows that everybody is trustworthy, to let somebody in who is unknown without having that same like ratcheting up of trust process that might have happened with the, you know, members who are part of it initially. So I think, you know, it makes sense for there to be some process of building trust if you're going to, you know, be a group that accepts someone, or if you're going to try to join a group, to recognize that they already had a process to ratchet up trust. So you shouldn't necessarily be able to just come right in and be right where everybody else is, because they have that history that's allowed them to achieve that cooperation without as much risk.
Yeah, it takes a little while to get things off the ground a little bit. That's so strange too, like when you meet someone and like you click really quickly.
Yeah.
It's just it's not even necessarily that you have like parallel personalities, just some sort of like compatibility.
Yeah.
I wonder I wonder if there's that must happen with corporations and stuff too sometimes, and governments once in a while as
Mm-hmm.
well, where it's just like, hey, wait, we have
Totally.
these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And what exactly is going on there, I think, is a really interesting question. I think, my guess is that part of it has to do with, this idea of rapport, which is not super well defined, but there is some like communication science and psychology around rapport. So things like the, mirroring of body language and the rhythmicity of the speech and the back and forth of the speech, that I think there's certain elements that can happen when you're engaging with someone where, even though we don't consciously think of it, we're almost becoming a little super organism like, in terms of the way that we're moving, the rhythms that we're producing with our voice and our movements and all of that. So I think actually a bunch of that happens with music, and music is a way you can like really quickly
So this is the other like really huge. Actually, I think there's maybe there's kind of three main points. I'm forgetting the third one, but the next really the big counterintuitive thing is that things like play and music, these things that when if whatever weather sirens or whatever started going off right now, and there was an earthquake, or there's things on fire or something like that, we probably wouldn't run immediately to like get a guitar or something like that for the situation. You'd want to like get out of danger first, and so it's not the first thing that comes to mind. Like, how do we navigate extremely adverse events? Quick, grab the whoopee cushion or whatever.
Yeah.
So, can you explore that a little bit? Because I think that's one of the I think it's one of the most important things that we could get across to embolden curiosity in thinking about prepping and having a food supply around the house, and just in a first aid kit, and just kind of some basic thing like maybe learning CPR, some kind of fundamental type stuff, is that it can make it hard to take some of those first steps if you're in your head going like, well, for like when everyone's shooting at each other and crap's hitting the fan, I better like take some CPR classes instead of thinking about the kind of creativity and play that might be involved and useful in difficult situations.
Yeah. Well, I think the really big picture is that our curiosity and our play, like those are very, very functional and important for learning, especially when we're in an environment that is new or is changing. And I think, we're at a moment now where our environment is changing on many different levels. And, that applies both to our physical environment with, increasing frequency of disasters, and our social and political and economic environment. Like things are really changing. And our sense of, curiosity, play, sense of adventure, all of those are there to help us gather information and build skills and knowledge to help us navigate as things are changing. And there's a reason why those, why play and curiosity and adventure are fun for us, because that helps positively reinforce us to do those things that will help us adapt as things are changing. And so we need to really embrace that and sort of let ourselves, have some fun, simulate potential futures, read some apocalyptic fiction, watch a zombie movie, and then be like, oh, yeah, well, what would I put in my shelter in place kit if there was a zombie apocalypse? Rather than like, oh, like this is a list of things that I must do, otherwise I might die. Nobody
Right.
wants to engage. Like, that's not a fun way to engage. And so, if we don't have that sort of invitation to play, it can feel really serious and really threatening. But if it's more playful, then we almost can kind of like wall it off in our brains that it's like, oh, it's not real, it's play. And we're simulating this, fictional scenario, and we're like getting ready for this fictional scenario. And then that makes us able to do that without feeling stressed.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, what is it about fun and play that can lead to such incredible creativity and insights and problem solving? I mean, I was thinking, I just had this like really wonderful line of thinking just over the last, maybe it's this morning or yesterday or something. I was thinking about some of the divisiveness of the points of views and some of the nuanced kind of evolutionary principles behind it. And it was something that was like, I've thought about these concepts a zillion times, but I'm generally like so angry. I'm so angry that people like don't get it, or like or think differently than I do, or whatever. And it was just, I don't know. I just had like some moments of compassion or something over the last couple days that maybe I thought of like a joke about a thing that like lightened up my mood enough to just start seeing things a little more clearly in an interesting way. But it was just about like I kind of I think in the way in which we that's besides the point what the idea was, but I'll share the idea quick. It was just about the way in which we advertise value is through doing difficult things, essentially, and that there's a lot of interesting ways to signal group identity is by believing like difficult things to believe, and so I already kind of knew that. I think about that like a fair amount. But then I was thinking about so like the more preposterous of the thing that your group believes that you will buy into, that you will go along with, at
the
least
greater the value of the signal that you're committed to the group.
Like you're, boy, if you are willing to wear that or say that or speak the language or whatever, it's a real honest signal, because you're alienating so much of anyone outside of that group. It's also, and then groups are kind of self-reinforcing in that way through these like mechanisms that aren't really conscious but stumbled upon. And then I was thinking about how then, so I was thinking about how like there's people that are advertising ideas by the difficulty of understanding that. So there's ideas that are difficult to understand. So you have to read a zillion frickin' books and then, oh my God, you finally get this concept. And then you can talk about it in a seemingly effortless way that's very impressive.
With lots of jargon that nobody can understand.
Or if you're able to do it in a way that they can understand, it's sometimes even more impressive, because people pick up on the word salad stuff sometimes. But yeah, the jargon as well. But then I kind of thought, like we're sort of fighting along these. There's people that are like advertising like, no, I did all this research. I actually spent the time. I have the experience. I did all of these things. I understand objective reality. And then there's a bunch of people going like, Oh, yeah. That just makes it that much harder for my beliefs to still, for me to still hold my beliefs as more
Uh-huh.
facts about objective reality are revealed by
Uh-huh.
science and technology
Uh-huh.
and modernity. And so there's like a conflict there. But then I thought, oh, there's all these ways in which there's things that do both, like actually conspiratorial thinking
Yeah.
is actually doing both.
Mm-hmm.
It is one, hard to believe
Mm-hmm.
this ridiculous
Yeah.
conspiracy, and two, hard to understand some of the ideas to put
Mm-hmm.
together the idea of how it would work. And here's
Yeah.
how the bullet would get through this way. And now I'm learning physics to understand how,
Yeah.
like the trajectory of this and that. And it couldn't have been a signal shooter from the tower, And so there's
Mm-hmm.
like some sort of interesting advertising within that, or within not just conspiracy thinking, but when people are believing a ridiculous thing and also demonstrating some amount
Uh-huh.
of knowledge and experience to have to believe the
Yeah.
ridiculous thing. There's
Yeah.
something, I don't know.
Yeah, it's sort of like believing a thing on faith combined with a bunch of knowledge about
Like,
the way the
well,
world
you
works.
really read the Bible. Like, who does that?
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Not to make it about the Bible, or just any. Anyway, that was an idea that I started tinkering with, and then I started, just kind of viewing some of those. People in those camps a little bit differently, because of it. But it's usually people that I just find myself completely aggravated by. So the point is that all of this time that I've just been like, aggressive, I gotta like keep fighting to think of a better idea to like undo the. Sometimes just like taking a break and having a laugh about it, and then you have like an interesting, curious insight. Is the whole I mean, what the hell's going on there though? Where is it taking like pressure off the system? Do you know like anything about like the neuroscience
like why
of like
is it
why
that with play we're able so I mean, this is something that we're actually starting to investigate a little more deliberately in my lab now, but some of the hypotheses that I have about it are that if you're in a mindset that is more serious as opposed to more play oriented, a more serious mindset is often, focused on things like resource acquisition, status, self-protection, things that are more zero sum and require you to be sort of cautious about your vulnerability, cautious about trust, about considering things that might not be in your best interests, versus when you're in a play mode. A play mode is like literally about information gathering, practicing skills, and it is, you have to be in a trusting space, either socially or sort of with your environment, that it's not threatening at the moment. You can do this safely, either socially or physically. And so I think it reduces some of the cognitive load of the sort of self-protection and, worry about exploitation and things like that. So I think that is potentially part of what's going on. And, like why, like how and why is it that it feels good to be playing and doesn't necessarily feel good to be serious? What's the, neural basis for all of that? That's I think a bunch of open questions there, but it
seems like some kind of mental kind of carrots and sticks though, a little bit. It seems like some like
we're getting some reward, absolutely, but reward for I sort of think of it as like, with play, what you're getting a reward for is not necessarily. So, well, I'll frame it this way, the hypothesis. So when we enjoy things, oftentimes that is we're doing things that are directly giving us a fitness benefit. We're eating food that's nutritious. We're, maybe we find a mate that is a good mate. We're, affiliating with others that might provide us benefits. So those things can be enjoyable. Things that are fun, they're not necessarily providing a direct fitness benefit for us in the moment. But I think, and this is my speculation, hopefully we'll be testing this soon, I think what's going on is that we're getting positive reinforcement for collecting information, building skills and abilities that can in the future have fitness benefits for us. And that I think becomes much more important when you're in an environment that's changing rapidly, because you need to be retraining yourself. You need to be mapping your environment again. You need to be ready to explore interacting with new people and new situations, and also building set of new skills and abilities for yourself as things are changing.
Yeah, I have been thinking about just like being a comedian, so much of what makes things really funny is high risk next to no payoff. That's
Really?
that's
like an example?
like just an outrageous amount of trouble and work to. And this is part of art generally.
Yeah.
For like
like what? Like what?
I'm here in town, partially for a few different reasons, but partially because I told you about the holiday.
Yes, the holiday.
The holiday. I keep telling listeners, but I'm always like, well, if this is someone's first time listening, then like it's gonna be such a weird,
the
out of
special
context
celebration
thing.
that you're organizing.
Yeah. There was a holiday celebrating the donkeys of the Bible, and in the Middle Ages is called the Feast of the Ass, and so I've been here in Phoenix, sinking my teeth into planning a
So
Feast of the Ass, and so I every idea that I have for it is like, the grander and more ridiculous it is, like the funnier it is for the this Mind Under Matter festival that I did a couple years ago. We as a community built a big porta potty in the middle of a field, and then had ridiculous lights and stuff on it, and did all these things, and then we burnt it afterwards, a burning can, and there's something about the or like the Buddhist sand art thing that they wipe away afterwards. There's something about putting a whole bunch of energy and thought into this like impermanence, where most people are a lot of life. You're buying like little lottery tickets all over the time. You're taking like a little risk, hoping there's a big payoff. But the Joker goes and like burns all the money in front of everyone. And what's he get out of it? Allegiance from, he's like the crazy guy or whatever. And then he gets like a following from it. It's this big grand display or something.
Yeah.
But there's like dubious amounts of payoff to that thing. And there's something about art and play and humor that has that to it. Like, well, that was a lot of work. Like, look at the guys with Jackass or something like that. Like, whew, you almost died for that, and that's hilarious.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts about that. So I think there is a bit of a difference between the sort of individual displays of doing stupid, crazy, costly shit, which, that can be I'm a crazy motherfucker, don't fuck with me. I have a lot of resources, I can afford to burn all this, I have some other skill, so it's like a handicap display. versus, yeah.
That the handicapped principle for listeners is the idea of conspicuously making things harder for yourself than they need to be in an effort to display just how
awesome
inclusive fitness you are, how awesome you are.
Yeah. So I think that can absolutely be part of it. But then I think once you start doing that socially, a bunch of other things can come into play, right? So you, by say building together this, giant outhouse with lights and craziness and it being a collective effort within the group, you can be signaling your ability to do this cooperative thing. And you just burn it at the end. It's like, you didn't need to do this, but you could just do this cooperative thing just like that.
We did it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you can get the sort of within group signaling of like, we're a solid cooperative group, and we could ratchet up our trust and all of that. We did this thing. And simultaneously, you can be signaling to others your group formidability. We did this thing. We just burnt it. We can cooperate and coordinate anytime for any purpose. And, we don't even need to keep around the benefits of this, wonderful outhouse that we built. We can burn it and we can always do it again in the future. No problem. We can do it like that. And
yeah, that's very good. Yeah. I love that.
It's like a coalitional formidability signaling. And, Ed Hagen and Greg Bryant, they have this wonderful paper where they actually talk about
Greg's
music.
At UCLA, isn't he? I should.
He's awesome.
Next.
So they talk about this idea that playing music together can also be coalitional formidability signaling. Look at us. We're producing this thing. We're doing it in time. We're, we have the capacity to coordinate effectively.
It does seem like a pain in the ass. Like as someone who's like, I played a little trombone or whatever, like seventh grade, coordinating, reading sheet music. When I see like real bands do it, I've seen you play bluegrass and stuff. It's like I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah,
it is very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, and same with dance also, right? It's like we're all doing the same thing at the same time. Like that's...
Yeah, I was watching some Instagram videos recently where it's like, one weird guy at the concert who gets up and he's like dancing crazy. Like not everyone's sitting down.
Yeah.
One weird guy dancing crazy. And then like one other guy's like, screw it, I'll go over and start dancing around with this crazy guy. Then like 3 or 4 people, then like next thing you know, the whole place is popping off.
Yeah. And I think, even more sort of viscerally sort of like showing coalitional formidability is if you have a group that has practiced together, right? Maybe it's a traditional dance that they do, or maybe they're on a dance team or, whatever, like, but they're coordinated and they're doing this thing. Like if they do that well, you're just like, oh shit, I don't want to mess with those guys or girls or whatever, like they can coordinate themselves. So
that would be I don't want to mess with them. Oh shit, are you guys on a dance team? Just run for your life. So what was the third, because I've read your book, but it's been whatever years. And what's the third thing that
basically, cooperation, community, sense of adventure, like those are kind of the fundamental things that we need in order to survive. And, sense of adventure involves a lot of things, including like being ready to go out into the world and explore your local environment. I talk about this idea of the apocalypse casual lifestyle, which is like you're kind of always ready for things that might go wrong in terms of, what you have on you, or, when you travel, you're ready to pivot if there's a problem, and just kind of embracing this idea that risk is imbued in our lives. And when bad shit happens, that can be an opportunity actually to practice our abilities to deal with challenges, and small challenges can be an opportunity to practice for larger ones, and sort of embracing that rather than just being frustrated that oftentimes things don't go well, you know? Because it
Yeah,
can be
yeah.
easy to be like, oh, fuck, today sucked and this happened and that happened. But you can be like, oh, well, you know, I got a flat tire and that made me realize my vulnerability if I happen to be this far away. And so then I'm thinking about like, well, what can I do so that if this happens again or something worse happens, that I have what I need with me? Or, you know, like you can always sort of frame small things that go wrong in terms of opportunities to learn. So that's, I think, a big part of it. And you know, not getting frustrated as much when things don't go well. And yeah, that, I think those are some of the ideas in the book. And you know, this whole denial thing, we also sort of, you know, talked about that, like how to not get too caught up in like, oh, well, I want things to be this way, and instead kind of embracing that things are maybe not exactly how we would want them to be. Maybe we don't even know exactly how things are, but if we're stuck in denial, then that actually keeps us from learning. It keeps us from embracing change. And ultimately, denial in the moment, it can make us feel better, but it has a cost in the long term where it does make us more anxious because part of us knows that we're not dealing with reality. So
Yeah, I think it's to I really liked when you're breaking down the 4 steps for cooperating or whatever. What was that?
You mean the chess or
No, the thing that you just read.
Oh, the commitment theory.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
commitment.
yeah.
Well, I liked the first one of
Yeah.
like starting small.
Small,
I just
yeah.
think internally I have such an issue with this where I just make things so much bigger than they need to be rather than taking those first steps. I think
Yeah.
we all do. Like it's like, well, I'd like to write a book, and then instead of just like putting words on a page and like, you know, starting somewhere and kind of just like seeing what comes of it, and instead it's like, well, what do I? Well, then I need a publisher, and then how do I? Okay, well, maybe if I like write the whole thing, and then I have it on me all of the time, and then I just need to find someone that knows a publisher and someone that knows someone who knows a publisher. Like I'll look for like limousines and I'll throw it in like a moon roof, and surely either there will be a publisher in there or someone that has a publisher. And if it bonks them in the head in the beginning, it's like just intriguing enough, and I'll write my name in the, you know, you like come up with these like ridiculously elaborate things that you think you would need to do to be able to like accomplish anything.
Yeah.
Like I go through this to like wash dishes or something like, you know, like just making things like so much bigger than they need to be than just to get started a little bit. And so kind of with that in mind, what would like if people wanted to, because being a prepper is like, it was always a dirty word. No.
Yeah.
One of the things with the pandemic is it's like it's made a lot more sense since COVID. But I think it again, it draws to mind this cartoonish like, well, I can't afford a bunker right now. Like, how do you buy a missile silo? Are there real estate agents that like have missile silos in the market that I can look at? You just make too much of it. So what? I do think maybe the word apocalypse might be a little, you know. Whereas like if we just want to be prepared to address potentially, say, natural disasters, for instance. Times like a lot of people in LA with the fires recently, not everyone lost their home. A lot of people did need to leave for a few days in case and then come back. So what do you do to just even be prepared for a situation like that? Some small little things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, you're right to point out that this idea of starting small applies across a lot of domains, right? We talked about in the social domain of, well, you start with sort of small acts of trust and cooperation, and then that allows you to learn about how well you work with someone. Can you trust them? Is this making sense for your goals and how your life is going? And the exact same thing applies for, being prepared for disasters. And it applies at all levels, from the having a flat tire or having your flight be delayed, so you have to stay overnight somewhere you don't know, all the way up to, having your home destroyed in a fire, or, getting injured in, building collapse, or, things that might be, very apocalyptic, personally or regionally, and then all the way up to global disasters, whether it's a pandemic or a nuclear event, things that will affect everyone in one way or another. And it can be really overwhelming if we're just thinking about here are all of the huge, apocalypses that could happen. How do I be prepared for every one of them? And I actually had this paralysis early on, before I really started thinking about, well, how can I be ready for general disasters that might occur? I was like, well, I can't really start because I'll put something together, but then I will forget something. And then that thing that I forget will be the reason that I die.
Yeah.
And I was like, so how do I even start? So, one of the things that I talk about in the book is how I started with my own journey in prepping, which I think of as disaster preparedness, not doomsday prepping. I think those are very different kinds of ideas. And oftentimes doomsday prepping is also associated with mistrust of that the social order will fall apart. So you need to be ready as an individual, versus disaster preparedness, which kind of acknowledges that we need to be managing risk on the individual and household level, but also in a regional and community-based way.
Yeah, let's assume you're, something like Asheville mudslides, bunch of buildings get knocked out, and people immediately all came together, started helping one another. I'm sure a couple people stole some things, and there was some bad actors and stuff like that. But all in all, this is from anyone you talk to, and I have friends there, and I've heard this. People really came together. So just we're preparing for that sort of a scenario.
And there's this notion of all hazards prepping, which I often sort of playfully say is you could just think about, what would you want to be ready for the zombie apocalypse? Yeah. And then you would be pretty ready for most kinds of disasters. What do you want to have in your shelter in place kit? Well, you want to have, food and water, medical supplies, hygiene supplies, some entertainment, a radio, things like that will allow you to shelter in place for, ideally minimum 72 hours. Apparently now even the, emergency management experts here in Arizona are saying it should be much longer than 72 hours, but 72 hours minimum.
What do they say?
2 weeks up to a month.
Yeah, I did.
So, but I would say 72 hours, you can start there, and that helps a lot, So
I just don't have, if I had enough gas. I have solar in my van, so I could kind of
probably water is the main thing that
I have a huge amount of water. Yeah.
So because we can't really survive very long without water. We can survive pretty long without food.
Some crazy 20 or 30 gallons or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe not that much, but
that'll last you for a little while. Yeah. But in any case, so the the idea
I'm just now thinking. I'm like, what?
Are you ready?
Well, because it's ever since I've had my, especially when I first got my van, I was still so on tour that I barely stayed in it at all. But since I haven't been touring and have had the opportunity to stay in it a little and camp a little more, you often pop into my mind as wait, if I find out shit, like I'm in kind of a good position in some ways, depending on what exactly is hitting the fan.
Totally.
And
You certainly had a lot of practice to know what you don't have if you're camping out in the desert for a few days, right?
Yeah. So I mean, some of this, if you had, what if you just had to go camping for 2 weeks? Is a pretty good place to start.
Yeah.
What would you want for that?
Yep. So you can think of, like having that in your house so you can shelter in place. You could also think about, what you would want to have in your go bag. But, if you are the kind of person who likes to camp, keep all your camping stuff somewhere where you can easily like grab and go that if in the event of a situation where that would be useful. The last few years I've been spending more time at music festivals and, oftentimes you have a little bit of stuff. You have like a picnic table available. Oftentimes you don't even have shade structures, but maybe there'll be some trees. But you're coming with your car and your tent and whatever food you have and, food preparation capacities. But, a lot of times people like in these camps, even if there aren't very, very strong social connections, they will, make a bunch of food and feed everybody who is around. And, like certainly if you've already played some music together, oftentimes you get invited to, eat together. So it's really cool to see those kinds of things organically arising kind of over and over again in these communities where it's a combination of sort of very strong ties, but then also some weaker ties. But there's sort of this network of generalized trust that can, come about. And, you see this pop up over and over again with these, the bluegrass in particular, because there's a lot of, the camping involve people actually interacting socially and playing music together, often with strangers and moving around. And I think a lot of other music festivals, they don't necessarily have that same element of people actually making music together in the camps. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see that. And it's really fun to be a part of all of that. So, I would say, camping, going to, festivals, things like that, those are actually pretty good practice for like also knowing what your needs genuinely are. Like, maybe we think, if I'm going to be gone for 7 days, I need this and this and this and this many clothes and this much of this and that much of that. And then you go and you're like, oh, actually, what I didn't have enough of was water, and I should have brought more, granola bars or, and I didn't actually need a whole suitcase of clothes for every occasion because that's not actually necessary in this situation. It kind of helps you realize like what the basics are. It's like, oh, you need to have, like your clothes are about effective thermoregulation and changing conditions. Your, food is about being shelf stable and nutritious. Like, it's like, oh, and simpler than I think.
Some of the fun things to like trade away. I mean, if you think about like in prison, like historically, like cigarettes, things like that are like very valuable. But I remember once being on a hike and got to the top of like a very challenging hike.
Yeah.
And there was some guy up there that had a bunch of like freezy pop things and was handing them out, and like, hero. Like,
totally.
That guy's the best. And so if you want people to think about you like, that person was the best. That was amazing. Like, be the freezy pop person.
Totally. And I think that general principle actually applies a lot to being prepared.
Yeah.
It might be because you're the freezy pop guy, or it might be because you have a emergency medical kit and somebody just got in a car accident and it's going to take a half an hour for, somebody to get there, and you happen to have quick clot and you stop somebody's bleeding and save their life. So I think, what are the reasons to be prepared? Well, it's good to be prepared so that you can take care of your own needs. But if you're prepared, whether it's with a freezy pop or quick clot, you can be a hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
That's
Yeah.
amazing. We're back to CPR again, which I do. As we're talking, I'm like, yeah, it would be handy to take some first aid, some like
Yeah,
some simple like
well,
paramedic
at
classes or
at
something.
ZAM in October, Joe Alcock is going to be teaching some emergency medicine and the zombie apocalypse workshops. So
Amazing.
yeah.
I have to have old Dr. Joe
Oh yeah,
on this show. I
absolutely.
think I'm gonna swing back through in May for a few days to do a couple of interviews. So maybe I can get him on and then.
Awesome.
But yeah, well, speaking of that, please keep your eye out. Make sure and join my email list at shanemauss.com because Athena and I and some others
Are plotting some things.
we're plotting some things for October.
Yeah.
Um, some live events that you'll be able to come to around the Bible Belt-ish area. Definitely there.
Yeah.
Well, we already know the ZAM
Yep.
details. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, so October 20th, 21st, 22nd, we're going to be doing the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. It's an amazing little town in the Ozarks, and
It is an amazing little
it is
town.
so awesome.
There's something, people hear Arkansas, honestly, it doesn't have the I rarely hear people be like, I've always wanted to go to Arkansas. I travel a lot. People are always asking me where they're telling me where they'd like to go, where I've been. And it always shocks people when I tell them that, like the Bentonville, that whole Fayetteville area of Arkansas is just really, really cool.
And Eureka Springs is the coolest part of that whole Northwest Arkansas region because it's in the mountains. It's this like Victorian town with these like windy little streets, and we're doing ZAM there right before the horror film festival. So if you want to stay and watch a bunch of really awesome horror films, that's it'll be right there. And we're going to actually do some crossover events with the film festival about the psychology of horror, also how engaging with like scary fictional worlds can help us deal with our current apocalyptic moment, all of that stuff.
So this is with
Colton Scrivener.
Colton Scrivener's been on the Here We Are podcast, or if you are a Mind Under Matter listener, you would have heard us talk about the morbid curiosity scale, figuring out what kind of horror movies and such tantalize you, and breaking down kind of why that is. And and
Colton and I have been working together a lot. In fact, a bunch of the stuff about curiosity and play and what's the function of all of this. And we've been talking about this a lot, and we're doing research together around many of these topics. So, because there's a huge intersection point here of like, how do we be playful about the, potentially scary things in the world at the moment and in the future. And fiction is just such a great tool for helping us be playful, not just as individuals, but collectively. We can be like, oh, well, what if this like crazy weird thing happened that we couldn't understand at all? How would we deal with it? And, it allows us to kind of have that shared attention on potential simulated worlds and futures that might be really bizarre.
Yeah. All right. Well, and if people want to find out more of your stuff, but not just this book, but your other, The Cheating Cell?
The Cheating Cell, yeah, it's right there, actually. That's the paperback version.
Nice.
And there's so you could see all these translations. This isn't even all of the translations, but it's been translated into Turkish, Italian, Japanese, Chinese, Dutch, a bunch of other. Well, I don't have them all here, but yeah.
There.
Yeah, there they are. So, the best place to go really is my website, athenaactipis.com. It links out to everything. If you're specifically interested in the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting, that's zombiemed.org. But everything links out from my website. So I'd say start there. And I'm also, reasonably active on the, brain eating social medias. On IG, I'm easy to find because I'm just Athena Aktipis. And sometimes I also post on TikTok and the platform formerly known as Twitter. And
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Shane. It is always delightful to chat with you. So.
Yeah, you as well. All right. Thank you, listeners, and stay curious. Thanks again for watching and listening, everybody. I, again, have some live science comedy events coming up with Athena, putting together some stuff with some other folks as well. But these are right around the corner here, starting like next week by the time you're watching this. So you can go to shanemauss.com, join my email list as well, because some of these things I'm just starting to experiment with a little bit, and you can see various stages, and then some of the summer shows I've done in the past that are a little more put together and more highly produced. So I'll kind of keep you up to speed with everything that I have going on in the live entertainment space. Well, I'm not touring with like a regular show right now. I'm doing a lot more experimentation. So really good opportunity to see me to create and be on the ground floor of something fun. All right, go to mypurplelady.com, check out some Blue Lotus products today. You guys are awesome.